All right, in our third and final video, we're going to look at how sociologists identify and define economic classes, those who have more and have less in society, looking particularly at the legacy of Karl Marx and Max Weber, two German social thinkers, and look a little bit at the end about the question of poverty, something we'll discuss more in class. Now, first we're going to look at Karl Marx, whose ideas are depicted in the picture here. For Marx, he was focused on the question of production, the work we do to make the stuff we need. Because for Marx, he saw that, in his view, human beings, what defines human beings is that we actually make all the stuff that we need to survive. You and I couldn't, if we were thrown out of society, could probably not go find the food and build the shelter we need. We as a society collectively produce and make everything we need. Go back to that toaster project example here. Even to warm our bread, we rely on the market. So Marx is interested in the question of how does a society make the stuff we need? And the fundamental division for Marx comes down to who owns and controls the means of production. The means of production is just all the stuff that goes into making what we need. So here we're thinking about the materials. If we think about that toaster, the metal, the plastic, the wiring, the covering for the wiring, the machinery, and the workers to make it. Who owns and controls the stuff we need to make what we need on a daily basis? Throughout most of human history, we are a farming species. Most of what we need is grown on a farm or hunted, perhaps. And increasingly, the question is who owns the land and who actually works the land and produces cows, bananas, corn, lettuce. In feudal societies, the owning class is the landowning class. The key cost for the landowning class is the cost of land. It's the key means of production. And most of the workers were small farmers. And what this amounted to is that the landowners would let families have a plot of land to work and produce what they needed to survive, the vegetables and meat and such that they needed. They would largely make their own clothes, own their own plows, but they needed access to the land. And so they had to rely on the landlord. The landowners would then extract a surplus from them, a tithe. Usually this was in the form of actual goods like corn, beans, etc. Later on, this was a tax. So what this meant was if I'm a small family, I would have to make enough each week for my whole family to eat, whatever that was, and then make a little extra, a surplus amount, to give to the guy who owns the land. And if I didn't do that, he would usually threaten to kill me or throw me off the land. A similar version of this was found in the antebellum United States in the South. You have the slave owners, who are also the landowners, who owned their workers primarily, who owned the slaves, who were the primary producers. In both of these situations, the more the peasant or the slave works, the more that goes to that landowning or slave-owning class, the owners of the means of production. So, if a slave works less hard, and many slaves had strategies to do this, that meant less for the landowner. Or the landowner could start demanding more and more of the peasant. And this actually happened in many peasant societies, which were those that saw class revolutions, because unless the peasant or the slaves can actually make more stuff, that means there's less and less and less for the small farmer, because the landlord is demanding more and more. The key cost, of course, for both of these is food and board for slaves. And again, this is a dynamic relationship. Right? So if I'm a slave owner in the antebellum South, I could spend money on fancy quarters for the workers who are my slaves, and that cost me more money. But I could just build a hovel and not really worry about its conditions and save money. I'm better off. The slaves are worse off. So there's a dynamic relationship here. The worse off the workers are, the better off the ruling class is. What does this have to do with our society? Well, today it's a little less clear because we work for a wage. We don't directly make everything we need. And we don't have people who are necessarily coming to exploit us, though anyone who has ever worked a retail job knows the pressure to work harder and harder and be more productive. Most of us will go to work for a firm or a company. And so we are working for the owners of the means of production. Those are the ones who own whatever that company does. They might produce a service, like Zoom, or they might produce cars. And then they own the materials in the factory. Most of us will be workers. We will work for a wage. And so in our society, the key thing is that the companies try to get more and more productivity out of us. We produce more effort or more stuff than we are paid for. Importantly, this doesn't mean we don't get paid enough. I might get paid perfectly well enough for the labor I put into teaching, but that doesn't mean the college isn't making some money off of my labor. Many manufacturing jobs in the US pay a decent amount, $15 an hour. But the point is that at the end of the day, you've made cars worth more value than the company has paid you. Right? An 8-hour day, let's see, times $15 an hour is $120 in a day. If you've made a couple of cars in that time, then you've made certainly much more value than the company has paid you at 120 bucks. What does this look like in our society? Well, for the last 30 years or so, looking at inequality, major sector and manufacturing productivity has gone up, meaning we're making more and we're making more efficiently. But our actual wages have been stagnating. They haven't really risen much in the last 30 years. We might get raises, but we don't actually have more buying power. And indeed, millennials and Gen Z are in more precarious positions than any other generation before them. What do capitalists look like today? These are the owners of the means of production. Some of these companies make gas, provide electricity, make computer and offer services. Increasingly, tech giants dominate this market, though previously it was oil. To put some perspective on this, Alphabet, Google's parent company, is larger than the entire GDP or output of Spain, $556 billion. Microsoft is $426 billion, so it's larger than Australia in terms of wealth. So these companies are truly massive, and the people who own and control them have an incredible amount of power in our society. Weber gives us a slightly different way of looking at class. Again, Marx is really focused mostly on power and property, but Weber is looking at class as an individual thing we have. Kind of, where is your position in society? So for Weber, it's not just about property or income. It's also about how much power do we have in society? How much do our decisions matter, and are they respected? And how much prestige do we have? Does our job afford us what we call cultural capital? Does the prestige that comes with the work we do open doors for us? And this is the kind of idea of socioeconomic status that we're more used to when we talk about class. Those who make over really upper middle class is closer to $200,000 today, but these are CEOs and politicians. They have lots of power, a high degree of income, and are very educated. Right? One of the ways we account for prestige. Many of us may be in the I would probably be in the upper middle class here, though I don't make that much. I have a doctorate, and I'm professional in my field. Um, Many of us may end up in professional sales and services around $50,000 to $70,000. You'll get a. This is why you're getting a bachelor's degree. The important thing here is that we're not necessarily thinking about the relationship between this red bar on the bottom and the blue bar at the top. For Weber, he wasn't interested in classes as related to one another. He was mostly interested in class as what it meant for you in any given situation on a given day. How much income do you get? How much prestige do you have? And how much power does that job afford you? Uh, Fairly famous sociologist Eric Ollenwright um, combined these to think about um, ownership versus employment, but also the degrees of ownership and skills and power. Part of what we'll do is think about um, how much power and skill will you have in your field. Currently, for example, I don't own the means of production, the university that employs me. I am an expert, but I don't have a lot of authority. I don't have a lot of power in my department or at the school. So I have scarce skills, but most people can't tell me how to do my job as a teacher and a sociologist, but I don't have a lot of authority. At expert managers, this is someone who has a lot of power, but is also seen as an expert. Here, some people might think CEOs. Think about your job. Where does it fit in? So again, the key difference here is that for Weber, individuals possess a socioeconomic status. You have a degree, a job, and an income. For Marx, he's interested in how the owners of companies exploit uh, lower classes and working classes. So the classes are related to each other asymmetrically. Asymmetrically meaning the better the ruling class does, the worse the working class does. Think about it. The reverse is also true. The more I am paid for my work, the less money there is left over for the people who own the business. So this dynamic has played out throughout history of workers trying to get more and companies either allowing or fighting them or trying to take back from the workers. We'll talk in class about what this looks like throughout history. All right, in class this week, we're going to look at the issue of poverty and the ways in which poverty can in fact be more expensive than if you have a little bit more money.